Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I have a ton of makeup to go through with you and show you items that I had in storage while we were living in Sweden. And I figured today I would kind of pull them out, show you items that really have been missing a lot of love for me for the past 3 years is how long we were there. So why don't we go ahead and get into all of this makeup. Alright, a little bit of a backstory as we get started. 3 years ago we moved to Sweden. Now we're living in New Mexico, but 3 years ago when we moved to Sweden, I took pretty much all of my lip products, so I'm not going to be going over my lip products because I knew I wanted to kind of go through them and really pared down the ones that I wanted to keep. I have a whole playlist, a lipstick roulette kind of thing, and I even have a video. Once I finished going through and decluttering those lipsticks, I decided which ones at that point while we were living there, I think we had about a year left to go, I decided which ones were going to stay in Sweden with me and that I was going to work on using, and then which ones could go home. So I'll link all of that here. But also this video was a little bit hard to kind of plan to do because I did somewhat of a rotation of my makeup. I took items early on that I had a smaller collection early on, obviously, and I took items that I wanted to use, and then about halfway or some point, at least a year into living there, we visited home and I kind of switched out some products. But for the most part, a lot of these items here that I consider being items that were in storage, these were items that probably had the least amount of use while I was in Sweden. Either I stored them because of size, or I stored them, especially if I bought new products, I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna leave my new stuff at home because it's less likely to expire, and I'm gonna try to use some of my older products in my collection while I was in Sweden, if that makes sense. So I kind of have a bit of a hodgepodge here, and since it is very heavy, I'm just gonna go with what's on top. I'm gonna try to save eyeshadow palettes and stuff for last just because they are kind of easier to grab. I have a ton of highlight in my collection in general, and blushes, so I left a number of those at home, and a lot of these were new to me while I was living in Sweden. I know I picked up 2 Laura Mercier highlights from TJ Maxx probably when I was home visiting at some point, so I just decided, you know what, they're new, they're beautiful, I don't want to mess them up putting them in like luggage and potentially breaking them on the very long trips back and forth. So I have this one here. This is in Devotion, and it's kind of like a pinky highlight. It's got a little bit of a no, this one doesn't have a glitter in it. I'm thinking of a different one, but it's got like this little just an icy pink highlight. And then this is the famous like highlight in 01, and again, such a beautiful shade. I really enjoyed this and I'm really excited. This is like probably one of the top 3 highlights that I'm excited to have my hands back on. Another one of those highlights is from Maybelline, surprisingly. This is their Puma collaboration. I freaking loved this highlight so much. It's kind of like a rose gold kind of thing, and I just found that it's so flattering. I really enjoyed it, and again, for the reason that it was newer and I didn't want to break it, I kind of left it at home a majority of the time. 2 other highlights here from Ofra. Both I bought during either like 21 Days of Beauty thing, probably both in 21 Days of Beauty. I got the shade Pillow Talk, which is very similar to that Laura Mercier kind of pinky highlight. Maybe has a slight bit more warmth. That's the Laura Mercier one right there, and this is the Ofra one. Again, because it was new, I didn't want to break it, I kind of left it. And then this one was one, I believe someone in my comment section mentioned how much they liked the shade Bali, and I read it and I was like, it sounds right up my alley. I kind of tend to like peachy gold highlights, and so I bought this one, and I'm actually wearing it today, but when I got it in person I was like, ooh, it might be a little bit too deep. That's the Bali one, and that's the Maybelline Puma collaboration. But this one I was like, it might be a little bit too deep, although I'm wearing it today. So especially living in Sweden, given that a lot of the year the sun doesn't come out very much, and even when the sun is out, it's not always the, like, for me, having grown up in the South, I didn't really venture out until like real summer was there because I'm very cold natured. So I especially had good reason to leave this one at home since it's a little bit darker of the shade. I wasn't going to be able to wear it because I was very fair while living in Sweden. I'm curious to see if my skin will darken up, deepen up. Even though I'm slathering on the sunscreen here in New Mexico, I still wonder if it will. Another highlight. This one is old in my collection. This one, however, was large, and that's the reason why I decided to leave it here. This is the Boozy Brunch highlight from Wet n Wild. I feel like this was like super popular on just YouTube back in the day. Just a gold basic thing, even though it looks here like it's got some pink in it. I find that when I swatch it, it looks gold. I need to pull this out and use it again. I have not used this in literally years. However, I feel like this is one that I'm probably going to end up using more as a body highlight than a face highlight. One, it's just not that unique to me anymore now that my collection has grown so much, and also I feel I'm just not as excited about it, although I really do need to give it a chance. You'll probably see this in a chopping block at some point, so keep your eye out for that. So let's see, I tried to pull out the remaining highlights that are at least sitting on top here. I have my Essence Pure Nude highlighter. I put this in a recent chopping block. Very happy to have it back in my collection, and in fact don't think I fully appreciated it until just recently. Then I have my Anastasia Beverly ABH Amreezy highlight. I don't need to like say that full name out a million times in this video, but yeah, this one is, I picked it up when they relaunched it because I missed it the first time around. There was so much hype with it, so given that it was new to me, I didn't want to risk damaging this guy because it's really kind of cool. This one was one that didn't get a lot of love from me over the past 3 years because I wanted to make sure it didn't get damaged. And then I have two more for the same reason. I have the Becca Champagne Pop. I bought this right when they announced they were going out of business, and this is probably my favorite highlight in my collection. I have like a mini of it, and so I wanted to pick up a full size since I wasn't going to be able to get it anymore. And then also this one is another one that I really enjoy. I have the mini of, so I picked up when I saw this in like TJ Maxx. This is the Lorac highlight in Diamond Dust, and it's just like a pinky opalescent iridescent kind of shifting shade. Very intimidating if you don't like duochrome highlights, but it is my favorite. Well, maybe not my favorite anymore, but for many years this was my favorite highlight in my collection. So when I saw a full-size one, I grabbed it, and since I had the mini, I didn't need to take the full-size one to Sweden. All right, let's try to move into blushes. I have a number here. This one I actually bought while I was in Sweden. You can probably see there at the top the Swedish like money. I bought this my first summer living in Sweden, and I found it in Sephora on sale, like literally $7 or roughly $8 in US dollars. And so I went ahead and picked this up, and I had not tried Benefit blushes at the time. I thought this was a unique shade, but the first time we went home, I believe in December, I went ahead and left this at home since I had, like at the time I had a blush palette to work on. I had tons of blushes to work on, and I just kind of thought, you know what, I'm just gonna take this home. It makes sense to me at the time. Now these guys were more recent purchases. I think I purchased these like last spring, and I still haven't tried these out. I've heard so many people rave about this like cream blush formula from Milani, and I have not yet used them. So I have like a very pinky coral shade and then a more nude shade. And then this here was another one that I bought sometime probably early in 2021, and this is Pinched from Flower Beauty. I've used this like a handful of times. It's definitely not as many times as I would like to. And this was one that, again, I think I bought it so close to the time that we knew we were probably moving back home soon, that I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave it home. Yet again, I don't want to push it and end up damaging them. And then I have a number of baked blushes. I really enjoy a baked blush formula. So for me, it was kind of the idea of, well, they're a little bit bulkier because they are like that domed baked kind of style. Now Lorac for a long time was my favorite baked blush formula. However, they're so hard to get your hands on now. I'm not quite sure what the story is with that, but I have the shade Peach Delight here that's very like pinky rather than peachy on me. And then I have a mauve shade. This is called Roseberry. Very beautiful cool tone shade. Now the main reason I left these two here was that I have a Lorac little face palette that I kept with me in Sweden the entire time. I had 3 shades. That was my favorite, and it still is to this day probably my favorite blush product that I own. So I thought, you know what, I have that formula with me. I enjoy it. I really want to show some love to that palette. And as many times I've used that palette, it looks so, I mean, it doesn't look brand new, but it's still like you can't really see much progress in it. So these will probably take me a lifetime to use up. Now this guy here was a newer one I bought in the spring last year. This is Milani. This is a Sunrise. Someone told me if I like the Largelier one, then I need to try the Milani Baked Blush formula. So I knew, like, I have so many peachy, pinky, I didn't want luminoso, but I saw on their website at the time they had this like bright orange shade, and I'm a sucker for orange blush, so I picked up this one again, Sunrise Serenita. Very pretty. I've only used it, like I said, a handful of times because I am just kind of getting my hands on it finally. And I think that's it for standalone highlights and blushes. Let's just go ahead into some other face products. I have two powders here. I have my Peach Perfect powder. Really enjoyed this one, but for the fact that it was newer, I did leave this one at home a good bit of the time. I know I did have it in Sweden at some point, but I didn't have it there very long. This one I don't think ever visited Sweden. This is Derma Blend Illuminating Banana Powder. I bought this last year during the spring Ulta sale, and I've only tried it like twice. I need to pull this one back out and try it too. And then I have a butter bronzer from Physicians Formula. This guy I left at home because this was my backup. I used up one of these while I was living in Sweden early on during like the first year, and at some point I decided to buy a backup, and so I just left it at home. I enjoy this blush. It still smells blush. It's a bronzer. I enjoy it. I still really enjoy having it in my collection, even though I have it in two forms now. I have it in a palette that is not included in this video. Now, another bronzer that I had maybe in Sweden for a little bit and then I sent it home at some point. This is from Butter London, which, are they still making makeup? I actually don't know. This is a little palette. I did, like, I don't know if it ever was in a project, but I did use it a good bit before sending it home to Sweden. It has like a contour, bronzy, and like illuminating kind of bronzer shade. I'm excited to pull this back out. I feel like this, main reason why I sent this home when I was living in Sweden is that it's a little bit more pigmented of a bronzer, so it looked a little stark on me in my fair state. So now that we're in New Mexico, and hopefully I'll be at least even self-tanning a little bit here and there, that will get some more love for me this year. I have a backup of my makeup fixer spray from Ofra that never saw Sweden at all because I've never finished my other one. And then I have several primers and foundations here. I'm gonna go through, looks like foundations first because they're on top. I have a Tarte guy here, the Amazonian Clay. I bought early on right before we left for Sweden, and I couldn't quite use it over there. It was a little bit too dry there to use it there. I think it would have worked really well on me when I was living in Atlanta, but I think I bought it right before we left and moved to Sweden. Then I bought the Pretty Fresh Tinted Moisturizer, and I have only used this a handful of times because once I bought it, I got it and I was like, oh, it's really nice, but at the same time, this is a heck of a lot of product, and I'm not going to use it up while I'm in Sweden, so it made sense for me to keep older products and try to finish up those, which I actually did use up a good number of foundations while living there. And then this was another one I brought last year. It's sometime in middle of 2021, and this guy is another one that I just had not used because I was like, nope, I still am working on certain things. Probably didn't need to be buying foundations, but it is what it is. Another product that is powder slash foundation is a Largelier one. I had this one for a really long time, but it's a little dark for me, so again, that was another reason to wait until I was in a place that had a little bit more sunlight. Now I have a couple more foundations. I really have learned my lesson about buying backups here because I have two products that I have used up completely that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and buy a backup as I was about to finish them, and then here they are a couple years later, unopened, and I have not used them. Like, why? I did not need backups. So I have a Neutrogena foundation and this guy that's been discontinued for a while. I really enjoyed both of these. I clearly used them all up, but there's a part of me that's like, there are so many other foundations in my collection that are new that I'm like, not that motivated to reach for them at the moment. Now I also have a couple of Stila products that probably have been discontinued at this point because I found them in TJ Maxx, and usually when those kind of products land in TJ Maxx, they probably have been discontinued. One is more illuminating, one is just a stay all day foundation. I'm probably going to put these in my chopping block very soon because again, it kind of came down to, am I going to finish these while I'm in Sweden? Probably not. Then they stay home. This one was one that I picked up while living in Sweden towards the end of our time there. I found it at TJ Maxx yet again. This is the Flawless Fusion Ultra Longwear Foundation from Mercier, and I was really excited to find this at TJ Maxx, and I have tried it a handful of times. It was a very pretty foundation. However, I haven't really used it much now because I'm trying to pan one that is that Tarte one in my Graveyard Project pan is very similar in coverage to this one, so I'm trying to make sure I finish that one before I reach for this one. But this one probably will become my like fancy, more full coverage foundation, if that makes sense. Okay, a handful of primers, and then we move into eyeshadow palettes and face palettes, and everything's left is all palettes. So I have two Becca primers here that I did have in Sweden for a little while, but I never could bring myself to try to pan them, just because once I found out Becca was going out of, I think for a little while I held on to them because they were Becca products, and then once I found out they were out of business, I was like, I don't want to use them up because I don't want to fall in love with them and then feel like I can't get them. Now I'm kind of over that. I'm ready to use them up, so hopefully later on this year I can work on both of these. And then I have the One Step Stila primer. This one has like that kitten kind of shimmer to it. This is one I got at the end or middle of 2021, so it was newer, which is why I left it kind of at home. This guy I never ended up using. This is the matte primer. I know a lot of people like this primer. I never really used it in Sweden because I wasn't as oily as I was living in the South, so I just kind of made sense not to utilize it. And then this guy here was one that I actually bought in Sweden, as you'll be able to see hopefully from the little sticker there. I think I found it in, it says 219. I think it was also like, it was in a sale bin in like one of their Apotex, and then it was like half off of whatever's in that sale bin. So I think I got it for around $11 or $12, and I had never tried first aid primers, but I know people really enjoy first aid primers, and this was one that I bought. I think this was the first makeup product I bought in Sweden once we moved there, period. And then before I even started using it, I realized really fast that, oh, I bought a mattifying primer. I'm not matte here, or I don't need to be matte here. I'm in fact struggling with the opposite. So I was like, you know what, go ahead. And I think in December, our first December, we moved there in August. We went home in December for my husband's graduation, for him to walk to get his PhD. And I took a bunch of stuff home that I realized I'm not going to use while I'm here. So this one was one that I sent home very early on in December. All right, let's go ahead and try to I'm going to try to fly through these palettes because I realized that I've been talking a lot and I still have so much to talk through. This is an Ulta Holographic Eye and Cheek palette. It has kind of like those like shimmery shades. I think the reason why I bought this, one, I found it on clearance for like $3 in Ulta. But I remember people saying, or at least one person saying, like, this is kind of a dupe for like those Kat Von D powders. Those are two swatches right there. I probably will end up these days using this, or maybe a couple of them I would like to use as face highlights. Like this one is more my speed for face highlights. However, at the same time, they're not the, I have other like duochrome highlights that are way better quality, so I might turn these into, see if I want to use these as inner corner highlights. Maybe I put this in a chopping block and see about whether or not this is something I want to keep nowadays. Now these guys here were 2021 purchases. I bought them when they went on sale half off at Sephora, and this guy I just left at home. Well, I left them both at home because they were new and I didn't feel like taking them over to Sweden just to bring them right back. But this guy I have still yet to use. I have a whole video, I need to stop doing that. I have a whole video coming of all the products that in my collection that I have not used yet. So keep your eyes peeled for that, because it's a lot. It might be about this amount of makeup. I haven't actually pulled it all out yet, but in my head when I was making a list, I was like, oh my god, DaLin, that video is going to be long. Get yourself ready. This guy, however, I have used quite a bit since being reunited with it. Really enjoy this palette. So easier for me to reach for. And even though it doesn't look like it's got a ton of use, I really like this palette. Really excited to have this one back. Another one I'm really excited to have later purchase. I bought this a good while after its release, and I really like this color story here, so excited to have it back in my collection. Another one that a lot of these palettes you'll see were either, like I said, too big to struggle with taking home at some point, or either new. And this was another one that fell into the new category. I bought this in 2021 and I love those purple tones, so really excited to have this. Now these again are, well, this one here and this one here, new purchases as of summer of 2021. So we moved home in the end of summer 2021, so in September, so that's why a lot of these stayed. So we have At Foresight, very beautiful. Milan, I lusted over this palette for so long. So when I saw it finally go like on sale, I talked myself out of it a million times. I bought it when I saw it went on sale, and I'm pretty sure they don't have it anymore, so I'm really glad I got my hands on it. This is like my ideal kind of neutral kind of shades. I really like the warm tones. It's got some more neutral tones, and then I love red shadows, so I definitely wanted so bad to bring these to Sweden, but glad that I didn't make the journey back home even harder on myself, because I did do it 6 months pregnant, which was not a lot of fun. Now this guy I think I had in Sweden at the beginning, and then I took it home just because I wanted to focus on some other palettes in my collection, and so this one was one that just landed home, mostly I think at the time because I was thinking, well, people can't get their hands on this, so if I wanted to talk about it in a video, which is silly, I'm not that kind of YouTuber, so I don't know why I put pressure on myself to do that, but I am excited to get my hands on this again now. This one would have been a really nice one to use during the spring, and I think that I just was overwhelmed by how much, I mean, clearly I had a lot to play with this year, and so I also I'm just now starting to feel like my baby is about to turn 5 months old this coming weekend. I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. And I'm just now starting to feel gathered enough to start wearing makeup and feel like I'm starting to get a routine with her. So yeah, and I'm looking at all of these palettes and I'm like, there's so many of them I wish I would have played with during the spring, and we're almost done with spring, but that's okay. This one was one that I had in Sweden early on, but again, I took home just to kind of give myself a chance to play with some other palettes. And this one is such a specialized shimmer only kind of thing that I decided to kind of send it home. Now we're getting into, well, wait, let me do these two and then I'll transition. These two were also new items that I bought while I was living in Sweden, so I just left them there at home just because I was like, you know what, you still have a lot of makeup back at home, don't do that to yourself. This one is actually a little broken. I need to just glue it down, but really excited. My mother-in-law got this palette and she really enjoyed it, and so when I saw it on sale at TJ Maxx or Marshalls real cheap, I went ahead and grabbed that too. Now all of these kind of were left in my storage unit because they're all kind of larger for the most part. So I have the Take Me Back to Brazil palette here, very colorful. Also, you know, I was wearing some color, but not that much at the time. And then my Shade and Light palette, this one was a combination of a slightly larger, not that large, but mostly new, and I wasn't gonna finish it, so left that one. We have an Abh Highlight Palette. Now this one was one that I did use. I hit 2 pans in it, and then once I hit those 2 pans, I was like, you know what, I have some other highlights, I want to show them some love, let me send this one home because I feel like I've made some decent progress in it, so I left that one at home. This one was one that I bought new early on while we were living in Sweden from like Marshalls or TJ Maxx, and I was like, you know what, I love it. I love this palette, but again, I have other things that I need to show some love. Got this one living in Sweden towards the end, and you know, same old broken record there. This one was one that once I hit pan up here, I think I went ahead and took it home, mostly because I have so many other palettes with these colors that also was like, am I really gonna reach for that? That's probably another question I need to ask myself and potentially consider decluttering to someone who might enjoy it more, or just get rid of it because at this point it might be really freaking old. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Then I have this Lorac palette, another large one that I remember like back in the day, or yeah, back at the beginning of my time in Sweden, I freaking loved the Lorac formula. And it's funny because I'm thinking to myself, I was literally thinking last night as I was thinking about and preparing for this video, pulling out all these palettes, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I feel the same about Lorac shades. I know that they've recently kind of reformulated and released new palettes, but I think I used to be so impressed by the formula, and it does blend so well, but I like a chunkier, more special metallic shade, and back in the, you know, several years ago, I really enjoyed this metallic formula, and now I kind of don't, it doesn't blow my socks off like it used to. It's funny how makeup preferences and quality can change over the years, but this was another one for the size I left, and all of these as well. So this is the Mega Pro 2. My dad picked this up for me while I was living in Sweden. I remember it went on sale at Kohl's like ridiculously cheap, like 20 bucks, and I was like, Dad, please go get that for me for Christmas. So my mom and dad went out there and picked it up. So this one was one that was new. I might have brought it back to Sweden for a little bit, but then I took it right back home at some point. And then this Lorac Mega Pro 4, this was my first Lorac palette, and I love the color story of this palette so much. But again, kind of surprising myself with how I'm not as excited by it as I used to be, if that makes sense. Then we have the Parasitic Caribbean palette. This was recently in my Pan in Every palette kind of project, and got to use this one a good bit recently, 1 or 2 months at least. And then the last 3 are all Morphe palettes, 2 of which I find myself very underwhelmed by. I thought I would be a little bit more excited by like being able to reunite with them. This guy here, I really enjoy the greens, like the color of these greens, but I remember being a little bit disappointed in the quality of the greens. And you know, since then I think I still feel the same. I was wondering if my opinion would change. I do want to kind of play with this as the fall approaches and kind of give myself a second chance with this palette, but I don't find myself as excited as I used to be. Like when I first bought that palette, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Now I'm kind of underwhelmed. Especially, I think, again, it just comes down to quality. I know that there are such better palette, quality palettes out there by other brands. And then this guy here, my very first palette, I think, in general, and it is very sentimental. I don't think I'll ever get rid of it for that reason, but I find myself, you know, underwhelmed by it. I think I recently used this purple and it was beautiful. Still works really well, surprisingly, because this thing is pretty freaking old. I got it when it originally launched. I mean, it's seen better days, but yeah, I need to also make myself kind of sit down with this for a good month. Hopefully it'll get rolled into that Pan in Every palette project and I can give myself a good chance to use it. Now this guy here, this is the last one of all of this makeup. This guy here is sentimental, but also I still love reds to this day. It makes me think of football still. I have not used it yet since being reunited with it, so I really want to. I imagine this will get hopefully a lot of use from me in the fall because I'm really excited to play with it again. But this is the 3502 from Morphe. I don't know why. I think early on I realized how much I liked these red shades in here, and to this day it just reminds me of fall football with my husband watching TV. And yeah, still very sentimental. This is the one Morphe palette that I'm excited to have back in my hands. So yeah, as I say that's everything, I realize that this video is probably very long. I hope you enjoyed it. I have an old video while I was in Sweden. We were living in Sweden, but it was towards the middle to end, maybe right before the pandemic hit. I think it was August of no, I can't remember. I'll link it either way. I had my actual storage boxes while we were at home visiting at one point during a summer, and I filmed with you at that point what was in those storage boxes, and I can link that video here if you're interested. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you say hello. Keep your eyes open for all the makeup that I haven't used, or maybe have used like once. Never or underutilized makeup. I have a lot that's going to be all of my shame exposed in that video. But either way, make sure you say hello, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.